Good afternoon, everyone. DMGeezerjim here, getting another entry into our Planescape settings series. Now that it's getting closer, getting more exciting, and honestly, now that it's actually we've got a better idea of what's going to be included in the 5th edition release, it kind of helps me focus on what I'm going, these streams on other stuff. Obviously, once it's released, join me over on Twitch. We'll do a lot of side-by-side comparisons between the 2nd edition associated products. I'm thinking Sigil and Beyond, and probably the Player's Guide to the Outlands are going to be the closest reflections to the 5th edition release. But that still leaves about 90% of the Planescape multiverse and stuff untouched by 5th edition. So today we're going to do the Inner Planes. The elemental building blocks of the multiverse, as it were. Today, let me rephrase that. Today, we're going to briefly touch on the concepts of the inner planes, the building blocks of the multiverse. How do they matter in a campaign? How can they matter in a campaign? How can they be used, or if they matter at all in your adventure world or not? Big concepts. The elemental planes. Let's kick back in, just so you know, we're using the 2nd edition Planescape multiversal cosmic wheel map just for right now because, it may not be the prettiest, but it covers what we need to cover, right? So our focus right now, before I go too far, source material, we will be referring to this map because it shows everything in one nice clean spot, even though it's, may not be the prettiest. I'll be referring to the 4th edition. Gasp! I know. Rule system might have sucked. Content's still pretty good, and it is relevant because there's some of the stuff that came about in 4th edition that still weighs heavily on 5th that didn't exist prior to it. The elemental chaos, notwithstanding, is the 4th edition interpretation of the inner planes. We're also going to look at the manual of the planes from 3rd edition. The inner plane information that was given in here, the Planescape core books, the box set original Planescape Monty Cook, the entries in the box set regarding the inner planes, dedicated 130-page manual, The Inner Planes by Monty Cook, summary for adventuring within the inner planes according to Planescape rules and Planescape setups. And lastly, we will also make sure that we're checking in with the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, Chapter 2, creating a multiverse, including the inner planes as that. Okay? A lot of information. This is going to be a thick stream or video. So if you're not in for it, I get it. No harm, no foul. Appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you've made it a couple minutes in and helped me get a view. But if you're interested in the inner planes, maybe you put me on a listen. Check in, check out, pause your recording, enjoy it as it is. The downside is it's really going to be hard to kind of go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I just want to just provide a broad scope of what the inner planes are, as well as get into specific examples of how they interact and how you can use them as part of your adventure. So it's going to be a little bit meaty. It's a thick subject. Planescape stuff really is. I love the setting. I love the concepts behind it, but I also know there's a lot of heavy lifting that we as Dungeon Masters need to do behind the scenes to make sure that there's no gaping plot holes, that we're able to understand the multiversal continuity and the structures of that and enforce them in our campaigns to make them engageable for our players. So it's a challenging setting. It definitely is. And a lot of people like too much from me, no thanks. No harm, no foul, man. But for those of us that are into it, let's get into it. Okay. 5th edition, Inner Planes. Quick and brief surrounding the inner planes surround and enfold the material planes and its echoes, providing the raw elemental substance from which all worlds were made. The 4 elemental planes, air, earth, fire, and water, form a ring around the material plane suspended within a churning realm known as the elemental chaos. This is 5th edition I'm reading here. Elemental chaos did not mean anything until 4th edition. So understanding right out the gate, 5th edition's reference to the inner planes has been codified as the inner planes here, but it's still in reference to the elemental chaos. The planes are all connected, and the border regions between them are sometimes described as distinct planes in their own right. Okay? Which is going to refer us back to they're all connected, and the planes where they connect with each other, magma, ooze, ice, and smoke, in some stances, 5th edition acknowledges that these para-elemental planes exist, okay? So we're establishing that as a continuity from 1st edition to current edition. Slight nomenclature name during the 4th edition where it was assigned to the elemental chaos. It continued being the inner planes during 3rd edition. So that one little hiccup adds a slight flavor. Nothing big, nothing to freak out about. Does not affect continuity in any edition. They're still the elemental planes of creation and destruction, but we'll get to that. So one thing that goes from here, as you're probably looking at this strange little almost sphere, we've talked about, we're acknowledging fire, air, earth, and water as the 4 core elements. So much mythology with that. Air, earth, wind, fire. I mean, I'm a big old Atlas fan. Go where you want with that. But yeah, they're established parts of D&D lore and every other freaking so many mythologies that you can lean heavily into the 4 elementals to create campaigns, base your campaigns in and out of. There's more than enough reasons to include these, not just to summon an elemental of fire and beat people up and go away. A lot of stuff here. Now, you're probably looking at this map going, what's that negative and what's that positive? Let me zoom out just a click here. The positive and negative energy planes were something that were 1st edition, okay? Pure energy, pure entropy. Yin-yang, balanced state. The elements as their own existed to do one thing: destroy each other and become overwhelmingly the dominant element. That still exists through all facets of it. The elements do not get along with each other. The border planes, notwithstanding, don't get along with the opposite. So the idea is without positive and negative energy, there would be no creation manifesting itself in the prime material plane. So positive energy, the positive energy plane, the Feywild, as it's talked about in the 4th edition. Let me scroll real up to their cosmology map here. It's different. I'm not, good, bad, ugly. We're not saying anything, just different. So the map that we're looking at here, all of these well-defined this, that, and the others, each of the elemental, paramental, quasi-elemental planes are all contained in the elemental chaos. Ironically, at this point, they also assigned several planes to the elemental chaos. That's a big difference between where we are now. The Shadowfell and the Feywild stood between the two, reference to the positive and the negative energy pushing those out. So that's the slight adaptation for 4th edition that we still carry in 5th edition in regards to our inner planes. The Shadowfell, the Feywild in 4th and 5th edition are considered separate planes. Planescape considered them the positive and negative plane. Positive 5th edition Planescape is going to replace the positive and the negative energy with the Shadowfell and the Feywild, and it's perfectly fine. The final step of all of this stuff being created becomes the Feywild, which then generates into the prime material plane. The destruction of all this stuff, aka the negative energy, becomes the Shadowfell, which is a reflection of the decay of the prime material plane as it breaks down and returns back to the elemental chaos or the inner planes, your choice. Nomenclature might vary, but rest assured, whatever you're used to, if you haven't explored it much, is still going to be intact enough as we go further into Planescape. So, 3rd edition, just so we know, definitely references to positive and negative energy and how they interact with each of the other elemental nodes to create the para-elemental planes. Plus side about 3rd edition, very thorough. I'm a fan of 3rd edition content, if not their rule set. It's just a lot, so much math. And the more content you have, the better the game is. That's definitely a thing. I'm not going to get into that. But very cohesive, well-written, and lots of if, then, and options given in 3rd edition lore, 3rd edition playbooks. So yeah, Manual of the Planes is third edition. Manual of the Planes would be a great addition to your campaigns, especially if you're an Eberron person, because it bridges a little bit of those gaps here and there for you, as opposed to fifth edition making the gaps bigger. Different argument. So Elemental Plane of Errors, discussed very briefly in each of these books. Same thing with the fourth edition book. As we apologies, let me get back down to, ironically, I think it's about the same place. 62, yeah. Demon gates are not a thing. They're probably going to be a thing again. A lot of fourth edition made the jump to fifth, even if we don't realize it. Even if it's the forgotten edition, a lot of the lore and the story contents are still existing in fifth, whether we acknowledge or realize it or not. So look for there to be a halfway point in here. There's a lot of talk of, now remember, this is where fourth edition is going to fall to the side. The creatures of the chaos included archons and demons and ifrits and elementals and all of that. There was really no divisive planes, aligned planes in fourth edition that there are in fifth edition and other editions. So that's going to kind of go off to the side. The one good thing that I will say about fourth edition, the Manual of the Planes, it goes into pretty good detail about specific locations that are mentioned in a lot of other things. The City of Brass, this is a really good map for the City of Brass. City of Brass is a prime example of a location that was built into the inner planes, in this case the Plane of Fire, that Ifrit lords, the elder elemental powers can interact with non-fire beings without them turning into ash. It's a safe place for mortals and non-natives of the Plane of Fire to interact with the rest of them. Cool city, cool layout. Likewise, the Plane of Air, don't get as much cool stuff there. So the Manual of the Planes, 4th edition, Fifth edition is kind of more comprehensive in a summary state of affairs. The third edition, will provide some information for each plane. What's gravity like? What are some possible encounters? And I do appreciate that. It breaks it down into very, very plain. The elemental plane of Earth has heavy gravity. Time runs on a normal way. Space is infinite. The plane itself is infinite in size. Morphic in detail, earth dominant, some magic is enhanced, some is weakened. I don't want to go too far into that. Well, we will, but that's just kind of a mention that may or may not make the jump to 5th edition Planescape. We shall see. So, moving on from there, all of this is in accordance with that. So let's drop into Planescape and the Inner Planes itself book. This is the meat and potatoes. This is really giving us a lot more detail and probably more stuff than is actually going to make the cut into 5th edition, which is not a bad thing. I mean, that's just that much more content that you have to add to your universe should you choose to go there. Never, never, never forget, me popping out to my face screen here, you can run 1,000 campaigns and never have direct interactions with the inner planes, and your life will be just fine. That's most campaigns. The closest we get is we summon elementals, or there might be a big bad elder ogre mock makes a stomp across the ground, something like that. The majority of the interactions have the elemental forces and powers interacting with our world, interacting with your material plane. Perfectly fine. You don't ever have to touch an inner plane, and it's not going to change your life. This is just completely if you want to go out there and play around. The idea of getting into Planescape and getting the multiverse is hypothetically every place that exists can be accessed, and everything that can be accessed has the potential for adventure. Not out of necessity, out of want, and out of opportunity. So you as a DM have the... one sec. Sorry about that. Kid got home from school, had to say hi, make sure he had a good day. But yeah, so this is just going to be information that gives you the opportunity to go deeper into those realms. Now, this is one big caveat. You're likely going to have to use Shadowfell and Feywild because Wizards seems to enjoy the concepts that were presented talked about in 2nd, codified in 4th, and still included in 5th. So just, prepare for that. So, despite my little spiel there, you're still going to have some exposure to the inner planes through the Feywild and through the Shadowfell. Okay. So this book, published in 98, new by classic standards, provides a lot of information about every one of the elemental planes, plus your para-elementals, plus your quasi-elementals, plus your positive and negative material plane. Okay? Summaries on hazards, summaries on lore. Every location, every one of the planes is given 1 or 2 locations, sites that your players can deal with. So this is a great, great, great book. I'm going to go single page. We're going to zoom in. I do apologize. The text is on this creation is a little bit faint, but just through the table of contents, so we don't go page by page by page as we do this. An elemental primer, just quick information that's going to be the same, consistently repeated through the book. The elemental plane of water, the bottomless deep. Physical conditions, what's it like for your players? Getting here, how do they get here? Environmental hazards, how do they get about? What are some of the inhabitants? Elementals, animals, monsters, Marids, which would be the Ifrit. Remember, that people always talk about Ifrits, but you have Ifrits, you have Djinn, you have Marids, you have Deo. They're all 4 peers. They're all of the same power. Each represents a different element, okay? And then you're going to get into more spin-offs as we get into the different quasi-planes, okay? Other races, powers. Some of the powers, the deities. Yes, some deities and gods live on these planes. If you get into some of your older mythology, that's reflected in classic Planescape, not so much in modern 5th edition. You have some information if you want to add that to your campaign. It helps you out here. And proxies. What are the representatives of these powers? What are their influences on that particular plane? Sites. Talks about specific locations, whether it be cities, adventure locations, dungeons, that your players can interact with. Some of the entries have more than others. Planeswalkers, how does the world interact with your players? What are the adjustments they have to have? Spell keys and other necessities. Okay, so this book is a collection of that particular information for every one of the planes. It's a very well-written, thorough, really thorough book. DMs, players, it doesn't matter. You can't necessarily say it's spoilery because you're dealing with an infinity here. There's not enough given about any single location to ruin it or to spoil it. It's an adventure seed. It's an adventure hook. It's an adventure something that you can incorporate into your homebrew plot to host a visit. That's a better way to say it. We shouldn't say force. To host a visit to one of the inner planes. No one would, in their right mind, would want to go to the elemental plane of magma, but if you have to do a specific MacGuffin to get your party there, then guess what? You got to host a trip there. Yeah, this is a fun little diagram that kind of shows the interaction between air, fire, water, earth, and how the negative energy interacts with each of the prime elementals, as well as the border elementals. Para-elemental is the border between the 2 elemental. Quasi-elemental is the border between the negative or positive and said prime elemental, okay? Earth plus positive gives you gems. Mineral, the plane of mineral, okay? I don't know why they didn't put that there, but yeah, you have radiance between fire and positive, lightning between air and that, steam between water and positive, and mineral between earth. Now, everyone wants to go to mineral because it's literally an infinite plane made out of ore and gems. That's every dwarf in existence wants to go there, at least if they know about it in Planescape. Instant adventure hook. Why does a brother want to go to the plane of vacuum? No one want to go to the plane of vacuum. The plane of dust, ash, salt. Vecna's got a place out on the plane of ash. Igwolf got a place over on the plane of dust. Powerful negative and powerful evil people have places, have homes, have caves, whatever you want to call it, have strongholds in some cases in some of these quasi-elemental planes as well. So you can have plenty of reasons to take your party into the outer planes if you want. You just got to understand them. But this is this next step now that we've kind of discussed what am I talking about? How do they interact with each other? How do they work through the editions of Dungeons and Dragons? What are their presence in the lore? We've established that. We've talked about, do you need them? No, absolutely not. If you want to include them, you just got to be knowledgeable about them. Okay. The first thing, as we step back, we've now made the decision, okay, this stuff's kind of cool. I could see my people wanting to go to the City of Brass. I could see all of my warlocks of all of their different packs needing some, wanting to now interact with their patrons in some way, rather than have the patron pop on the world to make you wonder, what if the patron can show up? Why did he need you? Now you might have to go see your patron on their home turf. You might have to go deal with some patron's bullshit away from the material plane. Warlocks, clerics, paladins, not so much paladins. They don't follow gods anymore. They follow oaths, which would be challenged a lot in Planescape. I'm looking forward to that. But your clerics, your warlocks now have their patrons and their powers now have home turf. So you have options and opportunities if that warlock of the Djinn has made their deal and has to go do something in the City of Brass. Here you go. The information's there. The warlock to the Fae, the warlock to the Fiend, even your warlocks of the Outer Realms, the ones that say that there is nothing. Okay, that's where I'm going to pause and say all aberrations are representatives of that. Look at the tentacles on the faces of the Mind Flayers, the Aboleth's multi-weird faceted eyes, all of the strange aberrations. That's the Cthulhu mythology of the aberration of the outer realm of the unknown. So that's even represented in Planescape as well. But we'll get back to that. So positive quasi-elemental planes, negative quasi-elemental planes, para-elemental planes, energy planes, all of them. The thing you have to remember is unless you set something up for your players, every one of these places is instantaneously deadly to a player character. Okay? The plane of Earth, unless they're in a cavern with air, they can't walk around there. Plane of water, unless they have long-term water breathing or a vacuum of a bubble of air built into a gigantic floating coral reef island, they can't survive there. If they can't fly, they're going to fall forever in the plane of air. And we don't even need to talk about what happens on the plane of fire. So you compound that with ice, with magma, with ooze, with smoke. And then you double down on that with lightning and mineral and radiance and steam and ash and dust and salt and vacuum. Lethal environments for our player characters. So when you're taking your party out to these places, if you choose to take your party out to these places, you got to know what's going on there, and you've got to make sure that you're providing mechanisms for your party. If they're dumb enough to stumble in, I'm going to use the plane of ooze as an example, okay? And the main reason is because this is the most accessible of the inner planes from Sigil. Okay? I'll talk about that in a second. Let's just go to the quasi-elemental, or am I quasi or am I para? Paramental plane of ooze. Ooze. Paramental plane of ooze. Page 80. Okay. Paramental elemental plane of ooze. There must be one place in the multiverse that's more revolting and loathsome than any other. Well, anyone who's ever visited the paralemental plane of ooze won't have to think too hard when asked. I've been there and it ain't pretty. My name's Tomes Ervo, and I know a lot of the jokes about the paralemental plane of ooze. So, breaking out real quick, some of these, that's one other great thing about the Planescape writing. They're done in different styles. Some of them are done from an interview point of view. Some of them are done from an autobiographical point of view. Some of them are just textbook. So, but it's nice to have a variety of stuff as you read through it. So it talks about the paramental elemental plane. At its heart, the paraplane of ooze is a noisome mass of slime. This disgusting realm ranges from clear gelatinous goo to putrid green sludge. In some places, it's almost thick enough to be solid. In others, it's runny and watery. The ooze teems with worms, insects, grubs, and disgusting bits of other things. Um, while it looks bad, the smell is really bad. When you started moving away from the paraplane towards one of the borders, it transforms closer to the plane of Earth. It becomes thickened until it becomes color and consistency of molasses in the revolting region is known as muck mire. It hardens around living beings, trapping them literally like flies in amber. The direction of the plane of water, the ooze starts to thin out before too long. It becomes green and caustic, referred to as the bile sea, and the muck here clings to flesh and burns like acid. A few sickly fish flop about in this horrible mess, but not for long. The decomposing bodies only worsen the environment. If you head towards the positive energy plane, in the direction towards mineral, it congeals to various ore residues, so on and so forth. So you can go 8 different directions once you get to ooze. Why did I bring up ooze? There's these cool things in Sigil, in the slag, the hive, the lower, the poor part of town, where the poor are, the hive, where your players are going to spend a lot of their time. There's known muck piles. They just look like slimy, dirty, mucky sewer water piles floating up through the surface. In Sigil lore, these are connections to the para-elemental plane of ooze. And if your party steps in one or gets close to one, a ooze mephit or 6 can grab them and drag them into the para-elemental plane of ooze. So that's why we're starting here, as we kind of do, as I dig a little deeper into how this book is laid out and the opportunity. Yeah. Getting to the other places isn't as accidental as ooze. So it's kind of interesting. Why would you ever want to make your way to here to the para-elemental plane of ooze is beyond me. No one wants to be here. There's not a whole bunch of gates here, but most of them are from Sigil. So what's going on here? Vortices. Remember, when we're talking planar travel, and this is an unequivocal rule for 2nd edition Planescape, you're either using a portal or a vortice. There's nothing else, barring plane shift, astral, ethereal. But for you to walk in physically, other than being able to pass yourself through astral, ethereal, your average dude's going either through a vortice or a portal. Hypothetically, an astral, you're creating a portal to go through, so that still falls under the same rule, right? Primordial prime worlds will have them. So what are our hazards? Remember, this book has a collection of like material for everything else. Repugnant as though it may be, it's possible for Assad to survive in the paraplane of ooze. It's actually one of the more hospitable parts of the inner planes. It's a good deal thicker. The goo that makes up the paraplane is a lot like water. It's enough like water that magical items designed to let you breathe will, while some work just fine. Ring of water breathing, spell of water breathing, airy ooze, anything like that. Anything that can naturally breathe water can't survive without some sort of magical aid because the slime is too thick to be processed by gills. So that's saying it's friendlier. As long as you have magical aid, you can breathe here. Vision. Color of the elemental ooze varies. It's generally translucent. You can see a few feet out without the help of magic. Typically, you can make objects out as far as 15 feet away if you have a light source, but torches, lanterns, and like that won't work. So we're getting very specific on ooze just because it's a number one, it's accessible. Number two, the layout of this is consistent through the whole book. So I would definitely tell you, if you're interested, yes, go pick you up a copy of the 2E book, The Inner Planes from the Planescape. Elemental pockets may be more or less common in the paraplane of ooze than they are through the rest of the inner. It's difficult to say. With so much different muck, they tend to resemble those found in the plane of earth or the plane of water. So either a bubble trapped in a large floating mass of something, in the case of water, or a larger, more dense thing that happens to have a cave-type system with access to air and the way of earth. DMs, we're playing with magic. We're playing with all of that kind of stuff. It's not too hard to hand wave. How's there air in here? Well, if there's representations of all the other elements, there's nothing that's absolutely pure anywhere. That would be the same here. You got lucky and found a pocket. you want me to take it away? No. So, but yeah, you want to emphasize the foul nature of it. As we read through here, they're talking about thicker and caustic and foul smelling and bad tasting. So, that's you leaning in as a dungeon master to use that to enforce the unpleasant nature of it. Your party's going to have muck soaking all the way through their armor into their clothing against their skin. If they want a presto, they got a presto 4 or 5 layers of stuff. Okay, if they need a presto, make it 5 or 6 actions to do it all. Okay, well you got the armor. Okay, well you got your clothes. Okay, well you got your skin. Okay, well now you got the mold. Okay, now you got the toe fungus. There's presto isn't clean your body in one click. Have fun with that shit. Clean an object. An object is a lot of shit. Other dangers. Because of the nature of these hazards, you typically can't see them. Acid is an environmental danger, ranging from very diluted to very concentrated. This is old school numbers. It would be Constitution saves, varying degrees of damage based on that. You might go dexterity, but typically you're not going to be able to see the acid as it's mixed into the ooze that they're swimming through, crawling through, whatever. Disease. Pockets of disease and illness are not uncommon in the paraplane of ooze. Find this. You can find this. You define the size. You define the regions. If you want to mess with them, they're instantly affected as if caused by a cause disease spell. Poison, the same thing. So any kind of biological, yucky, gross, weird damage that you can find here is here. And in most cases, whether it's noxious fumes or noxious vapors or contact poisons or acid, whatever, you can very easily use these environmental natures to just jack with your party, make it gross for them, make it bad for them. So the borders of the borders of ooze, if you think about it, in that the paraplane of ooze exists connected to not every, but a few, which allows all the other stuff to breathe into it, right? The stagnant sea is where the ooze borders salt. The oasis of filth is where it's dried out into just clingy, nasty dust. The muck mire is where it thickens to the point of like wet clay and crushes you down and suffocates you. The slag marshes are going to be a little bit more kind of tin and copper and rusty, swampy type thing. Gnome's home there. The choking gale is where the ooze becomes noxious vapors, so on and so forth. So each of them has a connection, and I like this. I appreciate this about the product. It shows you where each of the elemental planes, the inner planes on their own, connect and interact with every other one. It helps you answer that question. Well, what happens when this meets this? Well, that's where you have this. Ah, shit. Okay. Gives some flesh to the world. Gives you some information to work with and play with. Okay. So we've talked about it. Moving about it has no gravity, except the slag marshes, which is a strange exception. You can remain still and drift along wherever the currents carry you, or a little effort you can swim around, moving around in the plane of water, but it's significantly slower. The inhabitant aren't many creatures living here who'd want to be here. Para-elementals, ooze mephits are the most numerous, and obviously gelatinous cubes, gray oozes, green slimes, yada 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 yada. Anything of an oozy nature is going to have a lot of fun here. So go hog wild with that. There's things called slime sprites, ooze sprites, as we see below. Animals, leeches, maggots, electric eels, jellyfish. If it's slimy, foul-smelling, or thick with disease, it's probably happy in the paraplane of ooze. Okay, yuck. In addition to the organic creatures, the paraplane has a healthy or unhealthy number of animentals. These are particular creations that are native to an elemental plane of any of them. Now remember, at this point, moving forward in this video, in this series, elemental is all of them. Quasi, para-elemental, prime, all of it. Okay, so they share, other than their makeup, they're going to share similar facets. Animentals are one of those things. Think of a swallow that's made of pure fire, a swallow being a little bird. Animental. Um, a tuna that's made out of pure sludge, so on and so forth. Whatever you need to do as a DM to get creative and make that exist, go for it. Have fun with it. It's our little plaything. Expand number one, you can expand your repertoire of animals, creatures, and all that massively. It's like, oh, I'm in the plane of fire. I don't get to use beasts anymore. Yeah, you do. Turn them into animentals and have fun. Monsters. Okay, so I don't think they're making the jump in 5. Let me look. Apologies. I got the pre-order, but I didn't get the pre-order plus, so I didn't get access to everything. I've got to wait like all the rest of the plebes until release day. But we can do a preview and see if they included Animentals, and they did not. So that's still going to be a second edition pure creature that we get to play with. And oops, right thing, wrong tab. Sorry. Carnivorous jelly, killer slimes, oitugs, neo oitugs, baernal. God, what are those things that hang off the ceilings? Anything, stun jellies, olive slimes, crystal oozes, all of that kind of stuff is happy, joy here. Other races, other than the natives, everything else is a visitor, okay? So we get into Bwimb, okay, the major players. Not every, some planes, some of the elemental planes are going to have more players, more locations than others. That's the downside of the Plane of Ooze. As easy as it is to get to, kind of easy to get out, but not a lot going on there because it's just a gross place. The para-elemental Prince of Ooze named Bwimb Il, or Bwimb the Second. Arcanomental is just super powerful elemental ooze, man. She's looking beyond the border of her realms for allies. The Warlock of Ooze. There's a human who's gone nuts and set up his outpost out in the Plane of Ooze. Uses his magic to survive and grown into a unique kind of specialist wizard, having whipped up such spells as the Wand of Mold, Gelatinous Servant, and Flesh to Slime. Interesting, fun stuff. Sites. So there's no major structures at all in the para-elemental plane. Here and there, a clan of ooze sprites, para-elementals, or methods have set up a small set of fortifications. Very rarely of anything. Scattered throughout the paraplane are pockets of congealed coagulated matter. They form when Assad gets trapped here with a sink spell. The victims stuck in this cyst are perfectly preserved, just like living fossils in the elemental plane of Earth. When you dig through the cyst, you can figure out what it is. Cyst, from time to time, a cyst ruptures, freeing its prisoner. In most cases, the creature quickly drowns. In some cases, it works too. Gnome's Home. One of the few locations here. Speaking of unfortunates, a few years back, a bevy of gnomish miners toiling in the quasi-plane of mineral broke through a cavern wall. They were hoping to make their way to a new rich vein, but ended up pushing themselves right into the paraplane of ooze, specifically into the slag marshes. The slogs have never tumbled to how this happened, other than this, that it regrets that it happened. They took what they had and made a gigantic raft. Basically, a gigantic raft that's turned into a town. They couldn't get back to mineral. They learned how to hunt worms, eels, rays, and other creatures, made allies with para-elementals and mephits, and survived. So there's your location. The raft has grown considerably over the years and now stretches out to a radius of at least 500 feet, providing a shelter of sort to 40 gnomes. Okay, 500-foot radius is a 1,000-foot diameter in whatever way, shape, or form you want to build raft. That's a floating town. So this was an example of a site, a location, a hub, a quest marker, whatever you want to need. Okay, so, and again, without going super far into the depth of this, of all of the books, because again, we could spend 5 hours on this, and no one's gonna. I'm not gonna be wanting to do this for 5 hours, but you know, just kind of get to where we can close out. The inner planes, there's a lot to them. There's so much to them that it can be easy and effective to not really invest in them, but especially with the advent of planes, the introduction of Planescape. Especially with the fact that now we're going to have more information, a lot more direct ties with some of these other planes. Double down the fact that there's so many players that are running warlocks that have these infernal pacts, elemental pact, pick your pact with an otherworldly being that some in this case reside in the inner planes. So I think the game is progressing along. The settings are progressing along to where the inner planes are actually something that can be useful for play. Now, despite Sigil being released, despite the Outlands being released, despite there being probably more mentions of the inner planes now than ever, there's still not a bevy of resources for you and me as dungeon masters to invest in or to access without investing in. So that's why I wanted to kind of steer us towards this book, as I close it out. Certainly not trying to, I'm not making any money from doing this stuff. It's just me to you, dungeon master to dungeon master, saying, hey, this is a great source. If you really want to invest in the inner planes, if you want to take your party in, have them deal with their patrons in the city of brass, have them, get trapped in the elemental plane of air as they fall until they can, fly up to the Djin's castle. Whatever you want to do. If you're playing with Princes of the Apocalypse in 5th edition, and you want to extend the nodes, the elemental nodes further, this is a great source. The Inner Planes by Monty Cook is an excellent source for not just the 4 primes, but the other 12 quasi and paras. Got 16 of them out there, 18 if you include the Feywild and the Shadowfell, as reflected in 4th edition and 4th and 5th. Remember, 4th edition's calling it the Elemental Chaos. That's not a bad thing. 5th edition DM's Guide calls it the Elemental Chaos, but also calls it the Inner Plane. 3rd edition refers to it as the Inner Planes. This is a nice summary to add extra information in. More is better. And I will say, the 3rd edition manual, some of the stuff in the 4th edition manual, Planescape's 2nd edition, and most of the DM's Guide are consistent. So it's not so much a situation where you have to substitute one for the other. This is very much a complementary situation. These books all help you build up on themselves. They all build into each other, and they all help you flesh each other out. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and close the video out. First and foremost, thank you for your time. Likes, follows, subscribes. YouTube here. I'm over on Twitch chatting every day, Monday through Friday. Jump in. Leave some comments, questions. Anything you want to get more specific about or anything that you might want to discuss, I'm happy to get into the comments with you guys and, and chat and go into greater depth with it. But if you take nothing else from this other than, join my Etsy, follow me, like, subscribe, share. Don't be afraid of using the inner planes as a setting. They're a fun, unique tool, despite the fact that they sound deadly and are deadly, and they're infinite and they're confusing. They're magical realms. They're very, very primally magically driven domains. You can craft whatever you need in that moment to allow your players to experience the heat of the plane of fire without turning into ash. To experience the wealth of the plane of mineral as they walk their way through a gnomish town that's been carved in a 2-mile diameter diamond as they go about some mission. This is where you really get to enjoy the strange, the unique, the weird, the gross, the insane monotony, the plane of vacuum. There's nothing there, and your body slowly dissolves and dissipates and particleizes as it all wisps away to one unknown source. Have some fun with this stuff, but make sure that you get the information for it. So, the Inner Planes 2nd edition book here, it's really going to help you in every one of those environments, help populate it. The stats aren't a big deal. There's really no stat blocks given here, so it's completely agnostic in regards to your edition. It's just really great source material. But hey, DMGeezerjim here, talking about the Inner Planes and how to play with them. Okay, thank you for your time. Likes, follows, subscribes. Join me for more. Getting more excited about it now that we know what Wizards has given us. I can focus on what they're not giving us. So join me for more videos as this series continues to expand. Thanks for your time. We'll see you soon.